Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Sally Bagshaw, Chair of the Human Services and Public Health Committee. With me is our Council President, Bruce Harrell. I expect others. Many of you know that last night, a little after 5 o'clock, the mayor made an announcement, and I want to thank him personally. I want to thank the mayor's departments for all their good work. And here are some actually 10 commitments that he has made that I would like you to hear. The mayor has agreed to open up 4 more sanctioned encampments across our city. Those are like the encampments that we've seen on Market Street at Inner Bay and Othello, where people have places to be, where they can have hygiene, water, bathrooms, and garbage cans, just to make it a little bit more civilized. We're also going to issue an RFP early in January. I call it the all call. And it's going to be issued looking for more spaces for people to be inside. And I use the example of what Amazon did with the Travel Lodge, where they donated the building for a full year to Mary's Place, getting another 160 women and families inside. We're also going to ask for private citizens to help us with programs that will help us fund and move forward faster, such as the opioid addiction recommendations that Seattle-King County Task Force made. Also, from my standpoint, reaching out again to our governor, to our federal legislators, senators, and congressmen. We need help. We need federal and we need state help around mental health funding. We know lots is happening right now around what we call the Medicaid 1115 waiver, but we need to have partners that are really assisting us in getting the money to do what needs to be done. Also, director's rules are going to be drafted to allow more of our community centers to be open for showers and bathrooms for people who are homeless without charge. This is a big move. It's something that we've been asking for a long time, and I am grateful that we'll be working with our park superintendent to make that happen. So for many of you who are in the room, I know that this is a big deal. And it actually, for all of us in our city, it's even a bigger deal. The mayor announced last night that people who are camped out in places that are not prohibited will be prioritized for services and outreach and will not be swept. Let me say that again. People who are camped out, if those of you who want to boo, if you would like to wait till afterwards, I will talk to you personally, but I'm asking for your respect. People who are camped out in places that are not prohibited will be prioritized for services and outreach and will not be swept. That said, people will not be allowed to camp on the sidewalks, on parks, or playgrounds, or near school property. People who are camped on sidewalks, parks, or on or near school property will be removed, but their belongings will be protected and returned as protocols are drafted, similar to what Councilmember OBrien and Councilmember Herbold and I have been working on. So our city will also increase the number of outreach employers. The mayor said last night that he will double the number. We will have outreach teams and coordinate the services with providers so that along geographic and district lines, we've got more people available. Police are going to be trained and included in the community outreach teams. We understand that 20 other major cities do that already. We're on our way, but we are going to have the police as part of the solution. We're also going to expand trash pickup and needle collection. The mayor said last night that they will implement it within 24 hours of notice of somebody pointing out needles and garbage. And this is something I'm very grateful for. It is a major step in the right direction. Admittedly, we do have a lot more to do. From my standpoint, this is something in our budget that we're going to really focus on, both to increase permanent and supportive housing, to create the positive system change with our service providers, increase outreach and safe places for people to be in the interim, and again, obtain funding for opioid addiction to fulfill the recommendations of the task force, and to obtain more money so we can have our mental health needs and detox needs addressed. So I am very grateful for that. Now, I want to say this for those who are in the audience. This has been an extraordinarily stressful time for everyone. And I recognize how hard so many of us have been working. I appreciate the fact that there have been differences of opinion, but I also appreciate very much that we have come to the table and talked about that. So to my colleagues, I want to say thank you. To the neighborhood leaders who have been coordinating and communicating with my office, I want to thank you too. Just to give you a sense, we have received, and people have said to me, you know, how are you going to deal with all of this? In the last few weeks, all of us here at the table have individually received over 4,000, I think closer to 5,000 emails. Those emails, by and large, say, we want to do something that works for the community. We don't want to see people camped in parks, on school property, or on sidewalks. That is where our mayor, I mean, we all heard this. The reason we're having this meeting today is to acknowledge the fact that we have heard that, and we're looking for solutions that care for people. Very, very few people wrote to me, although we did get a few scathing comments. Very few people wrote and said, stop. They said, find places for people to be, find places for them to be inside, get people the services they need. But remember, we're all a community. We have to figure out ways that each of us can help the other, and that we're not getting in the way of each other as we're walking in our neighborhoods or downtown. So today we are not voting on a piece of legislation, but we will discuss the principles around that legislation. What we had looked at, and again, I want to thank the Encampment Task Force for the 17 principles that they have provided. We will talk more about that. Well, then I'm going to ask the Mayor's Department to come up.
My name is Jorge Scola, and I am the Director of Homelessness, the new Director of Homelessness for the City of Seattle.
Okay. That slide, for anybody who cannot see it, says increase capacity for safe alternatives, improve encampment cleanup protocols, expand outreach efforts, and expand needle and trash pickup programs. So okay. I think that with that, let's proceed.
Great. Council members, Chairwoman Bagshaw, thank you for inviting us to explain the mayor's proposal to create additional capacity for safer alternatives for unsheltered individuals, and how we're going to improve encampment cleanup protocols. Mayor Murray announced yesterday a proposal for moving forward on several key action items based on the principles laid out by the task force convened over the last couple of months. This is a good opportunity to thank the task force again for its work, and Chairman Bagshaw for your support in partnering with that effort. In his announcement yesterday, Mayor Murray made a commitment to transmit additional details to the council next week. So today, this is going to be a summary level of information, reinforces, clarifies his framework, but staff is working on details, timelines, which we will provide to you next week. I also want to take a moment to thank the many, many stakeholders and members of the public who have weighed in on this issue. It's been a challenging issue, both operationally and policy, but I think we all agree that it's urgent, and we all agree on that there's a better outcome for the people who are experiencing homeless. That feedback has informed the mayor about his approach, and here his basic plan is principles are to be compassionate, humanitarian, and effective in addressing the needs of people who are experiencing homelessness, and to balance that with the city's fundamental role in responding to health, safety, preserving necessary critical public access for the day-to-day needs of public who work, live, and recreate in our city. Balancing those needs, the mayor made clear that he does not support city council passing legislation that would allow camping in our parks, on our sidewalks, or on school property. We will aim for a compassionate approach to this humanitarian crisis that ensures these public spaces remain fully accessible for recreation, mobility, and education. With that frame, the mayor's plan addresses 4 key areas of the debate that this council has been deliberating since the legislation was introduced. One is increasing our capacity for safer alternatives for unsheltered individuals living outdoors, improving our current approach to encampment cleanup protocols, expanding outreach efforts to people living unsheltered, and expanding needle and trash pickup programs. Again, those items, and Councilmember Bagshaw, you also introduced those same ideas. We recognize the need and agree with the council that there are capacity challenges when it comes to adequate shelter and sanctioned encampment alternatives for people living outdoors. Director Ben Noble shared with the council last week in the mayor's proposed budget, he has included a $2.8 million placeholder for recommendations related to encampments coming from the task force as well as the council deliberations. The mayor's plan would allocate these new resources to a set of interim actions to create additional safer alternatives, which would be a bridge to broader improvements to our entire homeless system envisioned in the Pathways Home initiative. There are 4 key elements: 4 new authorized encampments, a call for proposals from philanthropy, nonprofit service providers, the faith community, and private sector to offer innovative ideas to expand indoor shelter options rapidly. A director's rule to open up designated shower and restroom facilities at pools and community centers at specific hours for free access by people who are experiencing homelessness, and a significant expansion of our outreach services that will be discussed by my colleagues later. In addition to these newly funded efforts, the mayor announced that the 24/7 Navigation Center pilot project remains on track to open in January. We plan to announce an operator in the coming weeks. The mayor announced that we are on track to release an RFP to competitively bid all of our homeless system contracts by late summer of next year, which will be the first time the city has taken that step in over a decade. Those new contracts reflect the approach in Pathways Home to make a more integrated, coordinated system serving homeless. That will go in effect in 2018. We know how urgent this work is, especially as we head into the winter. I again would like to thank Chairwoman Bagshaw for her leadership and all of you who have worked so hard on this crisis. Next week, we'll provide more concrete timelines and details on the Safer Alternatives Plan, and we intend for this information to be part of your budget deliberations. We look forward to continuing to work with you. Ian will outline our plan to improve encampment protocols.
Good morning, council members. I'm Ian Warner, the mayor's legal counsel. With that introduction, and as well as Councilmember Bagshaw's opening, I'm just focusing on those top 2 bullets there. First, as Sally introduced, the mayor will be sending down additional alternative locations for folks to go. And then secondly, that based on the guiding principles that came out of the mayor's task force in August, we are adopting the key principle that when those alternative sites are available for all removals where 72-hour notices are required, removals will not occur unless alternative shelter or authorized outdoor locations are available. Now, for all removals where that 72-hour notice is required, we will also be adopting a director's rule that clarifies the criteria for which we will be prioritizing certain sites within that 72-hour notice criteria. So that will be coming in the following weeks. Again, this does not mean that camping will be allowed in parks, on sidewalks, or on school properties.
Thank you.
Great. My name is Scott Lindsay. I'm Public Safety Advisor to Mayor Murray. I want to address with you today the mayor's plans for expanding outreach programs and also addressing sanitation. So 3 years ago when the mayor came into office, the city employed or contracted for 1.5 full-time employees to do dedicated outreach to those living unsheltered, combined with another 3 or 4 who were working addressing downtown folks involved in civility behavior issues. Under the state of emergency, the mayor expanded that significantly by 3-fold, and now we have 6 full-time outreach workers who address the unsheltered population, and almost an additional 10 that work in the downtown area as well as Capitol Hill addressing unsheltered persons. The mayor has said, as of yesterday, that he plans to double the size of those programs so that the city, for the first time, would really have a significant citywide capacity for outreach to unsheltered persons. What that should mean is that every person living in a tent, whether it's in an unsuitable location or an area impeding some other function, we should have the capacity to reach out to that person and attempt to bring them indoors, and that's really the heart of this. We also, of course, as George mentioned, want to match that with them, the back-end capacity to actually have a place for them to go. And in the last year in particular, we've learned a lot of lessons about what works and what doesn't for that process. With regards to sanitation, the mayor's budget includes $2 million for additional sanitation efforts. This is picking up both trash and needles around the city. And in particular, that includes an improvement in the illegal dumping response time, a significant effort with regards to the unsanctioned encampment, garbage pilot programs that include, at the recommendation of Councilmember Herbold, providing trash bags and other harm reduction services at certain unauthorized encampment locations, a neighborhood litter pilot program that will include litter pickup in vast stretches of the city that have concentrations of unauthorized encampment and consequent trash and debris accumulation. And in addition, over the last 3 months, the Seattle Public Utilities Department has significantly increased its ability to respond to reports of needles. And so as of today, we right now have 5 days a week, a 24-hour response time for needle pickup. And we are planning with the funds included in the budget to increase that to a 7-day-a-week capacity for a 24-hour response time for reports of needles on public property for the city to pick up. In addition, the city will be depositing or creating large needle disposal bins at key locations around the city where we have high concentrations of needle reports, in addition to establishing over a dozen needle drop boxes at park bathrooms around the city that are commonly utilized for that purpose right now. And finally, as a part of the outreach efforts, I want to go back to that for 1 minute. Many other cities over the last 2 or 3 years have been piloting programs to join police officers with outreach workers for a more proactive problem-solving approach to unsheltered persons, sometimes who are also engaged in problematic or sometimes criminal behaviors. And the city and chief and mayor have agreed to pilot that as well here. So that's going to start with 1 sergeant and 8 officers, pairing with dedicated outreach persons. The purpose of that, of course, is not to criminalize the homeless. It's the opposite. It's to get at the underlying root causes and give police officers a better option besides the binary choice of making an arrest or not an arrest. Is to give them the choice to work with the persons and with the outreach workers to get at underlying root causes, whether that be a substance abuse disorder or mental illness. Thank you.
So I just want to follow up with that and reiterate what we've said before, that I'm really concerned that we don't conflate homelessness with criminal behavior. And I've also heard folks say, people who are homeless are using the needles and throwing them in the playgrounds. That is true in some instances. It's also not true in some instances. So we want to make sure that as a community, we're recognizing we're all in this together. And we've got to be honest about who's doing what and be able to approach people individually. When we talk about person-centered approaches, that's really our goal. And I don't think anybody at this table disagrees with that.
And so we do need to find safer places for people to go, which is exactly why the mayor has proposed expanding the safer alternatives. And that includes, as an example, one example was the Airport Way Royal Brom site, which is we were finding from the Greenbelt that despite offering significant housing and shelter, quality shelter options, that because of substance abuse disorders or mental illness, that many weren't yet prepared to accept that. So we need to move them on a continuum towards accepting those housing options. And the first step was getting them out from under the freeway and to a place where outreach workers could access them, where they had access to portable toilets, where they had access to police and fire services like the rest of the residents of the city. And so over 100 of those 350 accepted that option. Many others, about 24, accepted housing or shelter options, indoor housing or shelter options, and several others accepted some form of a detox or substance abuse program offered by UGM or offered by others. While all of us would have liked that the number accepting housing and shelter from the get-go would have been higher, it was not for lack of effort. Union Gospel Mission went in almost every single day for 4 months straight, making dozens and dozens of contacts with almost every individual there. And we found what was the best interim solution for every one of those individuals. And frankly, for others that would refuse to accept either going to the Royal Brom site or going to indoor shelter, we said, just move them out. And even if they are living within other unsanctioned encampments elsewhere in the city, which is still can be problematic for us, it will still be safer for them than living under the freeway. So that's been the solution.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Brien.
Scott, I want to, well, Mayor's team, I want to say I appreciate the work in the past few weeks together and being able to collaborate, specifically you. That's been really helpful and productive. And I also appreciate, I wasn't able to see the mayor's announcement yesterday, so I just had a chance to read reports, but I appreciate the commitment. I think, as Councilmember Herbold and others have said, I think there's a lot of good commitments in there. There are a couple areas that remain seriously concerning to me. One is about what does an offer of suitable housing look like? We spent a lot of time on the ordinance that I've been working on and a lot of us have been working on getting that definition right, because I think that's important. And I think this issue of when do we sweep people when we've offered them suitable housing, what I've seen in what happened in the Duwamish Greenbelt, the jungle, and you talked about lessons learned, was that, a fraction of the people accepted shelter, but the vast majority didn't. And I'm interested in hearing, is the lesson learned that wasn't a suitable offer, or did that qualify? And I heard you speak to UGM saying it wasn't for lack of effort, and I'm concerned that we might measure our success by we tried really hard, but we have to find options for folks that work. And what I'm worried about is if we say we tried really hard, but we didn't have options that worked for them, are we going to sweep them, or are we going to let folks stay?
Councilmember, you make a very strong point, and so part of the lesson learned here is that we, and this is included in the Pathways Home report as well, is that we need lower barrier options for some individuals to move them up through a progression, through a continuum, from first off of unsafe, dangerous locations to places where we know where they're going to be, where outreach can access them. And in many cases, as a first step, that's still going to be outdoor. And so that is why the mayor's plan includes setting up 4 additional sanctioned outdoor locations, which would be the first step in that progression.
So that leads to my next question, and those are good efforts. By the one-night count last year, there were about 3,000 people sleeping unsheltered. Nearly 500 were in the one location under the freeway. I can't imagine that these sanctioned encampments are going to be at the scale to accommodate 3,000 people. You've also said that camping would not be allowed on sidewalks anywhere on any park property and a number of other places. Have you done the math to show that there are spaces outdoors that the city owns that people will be able to stay that can accommodate 3,000 people today?
Yeah. So there are 900 people, according to the one-night count, 900 people living in vehicles, so 2,100 who are outdoors, unsheltered, living either without any structure or within a tent. What we are not trying to solve for the full 2,100. What the mayor's commitment is that for those people who are not living in particularly dangerous areas or problematic areas like playfields or near school grounds, which are very realistic scenarios that we've been dealing with for the past many months, that in those cases, we will be able to offer them a location where a safer alternative location for them to be before displacement. That's the mayor's commitment as a part of a plan, and we are building up toward that. And that's the plan we will be next week asking and sending down toward council.
Well, what you just said is actually consistent with what I support, so that's good to hear. I mean, you talked about playgrounds and school grounds as being off limits as problematic, and that those are places where we should work with those folks immediately to either get them into shelter if we have it, or find some other place that's suitable. What I didn't hear you say, and what I heard you say earlier, was all park property would be off limits and people would be swept from all park property. Is that accurate or not?
There's no plan nor capability to sweep persons off of all park property, right? And in fact, and this is the reality of the situation now, which is we have a lot of people living in green belts and other areas. But we do need to preserve that capability, particularly for to address those areas. And the mayor has said very clearly that he will not accept a plan that authorizes camping in park property. But our resources are constrained.
Has a question. Okay.
One last one. So I appreciate that. And the legislation, I think if you look at the legislation we've been working on, none of it authorizes, but it simply says we will not sweep people until we have housing. So
Can I ask the audience once again, please, don't boo.
I want to, there's some principles here that I think we're touching on back and forth where there's a lot of overlap. The specific language, the specific operationalization of this is going to be really important. And I want to commit to working with your team in good faith moving forward.